डियर स्टूडेंट्स, आज हम एक नई सीरीज स्टार्ट करने जा रहे हैं रिगार्डिंग दी थर्मोकेमिस्ट्री। वो आज की ये सीरीज होगी, इट विल बी टू द पॉइंट, स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड, बेसिक्स अबाउट द टॉपिक एंड द मेन इंफॉर्मेशन which is required to qualify any exam or any competitive exam. So today's topic is define thermochemistry. What is this thermochemistry? Second point, principles of thermochemistry. So let's move to our topic. Number one, thermochemistry. So thermochemistry is a study of heat energy, or it's a study of heat changes. You can write it's a study of heat energy which is associated with the chemical reactions. Means you can write the study of heat changes. That will be much better. So it's the study of heat changes. Heat changes associated with any chemical reaction. So कोई भी chemical reaction जिसमें हमारे पास reactants और products होते हैं. So during the reaction of reactants and the formation of products, there are always heat changes. Means heat is either absorbed or heat is evolved. So this all process, this all study which deals with these heat changes, that's called thermochemistry, number one. Number two, it also deals with the phase changes. Means, for example, melting and boiling. Melting, you can take example, for example, ice. When you heat the ice, it gets converted to the liquid, that's water, that's called melting. Now for this melting process, you need the heat to be supplied, so it absorbs the heat, number one. Same is the case, for example, if you have a liquid, any substance in the liquid form, you want to convert it into solid, so you have to remove the heat. So that means this freezing process, that also it results in the evolution of heat or release of heat. So this is called a phase change, conversion of solid to liquid and liquid to gas and vice versa. So ये जो phase changes है, in these phase changes also there is absorption or there is release of heat. There is absorption or there is evolution of heat. Now this also, the phase changes which are accompanied by energy or heat changes, that this is also included in the thermochemistry. So thermochemistry includes heat changes which are associated with chemical reactions, number one, and also the heat changes with the phase transformation. During any phase change, the absorption or evolution of heat, so that also is included in the thermochemistry. Then, so whatever reaction happens, it is accompanied by release or absorption of energy. Okay? Or same is the case with the phases. Now, if during any phase transformation or during any chemical reaction there is absorption of heat, so this process is called as endothermic process, and if there is release of heat, it's called as exothermic process. So in the thermochemistry we have endothermic and exothermic processes. Those chemical reactions are those phase transformations which are accompanied by release of heat, that they are called as exothermic processes, and those which are accompanied by absorption of heat or absorption of energy, they are called as endothermic processes. So this is all about the basics of thermochemistry. Now let's move to the topic number two, that is the principles of thermochemistry. यानी जो thermochemistry is based on certain principles. जो इसके main दो principles है, that is Lavosier and Laplace law. This is also called as principle of conservation of energy. Second law is Hess's law. It's also called law of constant heat submission. Okay? So let's move to the point number one. First law, Lavosier-Laplace law. It says that energy changes accompanying during a chemical reaction, that is equal and opposite to the energy changes accompanying the reverse process. Means अगर आप कोई भी chemical reaction carry out करते हैं, A plus B gives C, so you make the reactants to react and then you get the product. Let us say this process it involves either absorption or evolution of heat. Now if you want to decompose your product now back to A and B, then you require the same amount of heat but with the opposite sign. For example, देखिए, for example we have this elemental carbon, or this is carbon in the form of graphite. It gets oxidized or it reacts with oxygen, it forms carbon monoxide. which is a gas. So this process, it's exothermic. In complete combustion, amount of heat evolved or enthalpy of reaction is minus 108.98 kilojoules. Now, if this is your product, means you want to take this carbon dioxide and you want to get this convert back into the carbon and oxygen. That process can be called as decomposition. So with this decomposition, you need to supply the same amount of heat, that is minus 108.98 kilojoules. So since you need to supply this, its sign is opposite. So the pata ye chala that in the Lavosier-Laplace law, that during any chemical reaction, reactants react to form the products. This is associated with some amount of energy released or absorbed. Now if you want to convert the product back into the reactants, you need to supply the same amount of heat. So that means energy is conserved. Okay? So in the forward and backward processes, energy is conserved. So that's why it's called as principle of conservation of energy. So this is your principle number 1. Second principle, जिसमें thermochemistry based है, that is Hess's law. It's also called as law of constant heat summation. So what it says, energy changes accompanying any transformation. So transformation means conversion of reactants into products or products into reactants, or phase changes. So this transformation, the energy change is same whether the process occurs in one step or many steps. Means अगर आप कोई chemical reaction carry out कर रहे हो, you are doing this in one step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 steps. If you do the same reaction in the single step, जो heat changes involved होंगी in the single step, that will be same as the heat changes involved in overall whole number of steps, जितने भी आप steps carry out करते हो. For example, this is the diagram. It shows conversion of carbon to carbon dioxide, that is burning. So you are converting carbon, you are reacting carbon, or you are oxidizing carbon with the help of oxygen. So this carbon plus oxygen gives carbon dioxide. This is associated with the release of energy, that is, it is exothermic, minus 393.5 kilojoules. So this amount of energy heat is released. Now if you do the same reaction, 2 steps. In the step number 1, what you do, you react this carbon with half mole of oxygen to form carbon monoxide. Now this step involves release of heat, that's 110.5 kilojoules. Now in the second step, you convert this carbon monoxide into the carbon dioxide. यहाँ पे देख लीजिए CO2 carbon dioxide. So this is accompanied by release of heat, that is minus 283 kilojoules. So what is the total amount of heat released? That is this plus this. So that also becomes the same factor, that is minus 393. So the conclusion is that you do a chemical reaction in single step, or you do the same reaction in multiple steps, the heat changes always remain the same. So this is called as the Hess's law. Now the question is that why it's called law of constant heat summation. Let's look at this diagram. We are converting a substance A into substance B, the product B, or into substance B. This is accompanied by release of heat, that is delta H. Okay? Now we want to do the same process through this way. What we are doing, we'll convert A into C, then C into D, and then D back into A. So this process requires heat changes at this step, that is delta H1, this is delta H2, this is delta H3. Now as per the Hess's law, delta H1 plus delta H2 plus delta H3, this is same as delta H. So we write down, according to Hess's law, the total heat changes through this cycle, through this pathway, that is delta H1 plus delta H2 plus delta H3. Since we have added these heat changes in multiple steps to get the total heat change, so this is called as the summation, law of summation. So that's why it's called a Hess's law of summation. Means जितनी भी heat changes होंगी इस pathway में, you can achieve the total heat change by adding these heat changes at each and every step. Final is that आप इस pathway से जितना heat involve होगा, heat changes, that will be the same as through this pathway. So this is your Hess's law of constant heat summation, that is the energy changes accompanying any transformation, that is same whether the process is carried on in single step or multiple steps. तो ये आज का हमारा टॉपिक था, to the point, thermochemistry and principles of thermochemistry. So this was all about our today's topics. To understand this further, So you can also download the PDF note of the same presentation here, and you can go through it. If still you have the question, you can write down the message, you can write down the comment. So inshallah we'll go through it again. So this is for the today here.